Everyone. Another announcement while we're waiting. The Miami Jewish Film Festival is coming to Beth Am. Thank goodness, because we love not having to schlep all the way to North Miami. Anyway, on January 18th, Stuart and I are sponsoring a film on Henrietta Zold, who is the founder of Hadassah, at 1 o'clock. So I hope you'll all attend, and all the other ones too, because the more we attend the films here, the more they'll continue to bring them here. It's also going to be reshown on Monday at Aventura JCC at 7:30 for people that live up there. But I'd love you all to attend, and thank you. It's at the Hub.
Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, 2 more nights of Hanukkah. Okay. There's 2 pages coming around, so you should have 2 sheets each. They look totally different. Just FYI. Okay, here we go. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berito V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berito Olam Bein Yuven v'nei Yisrael oti leolam Oti leolam v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam berit olam ki sheshet yomim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim V'et ha'aretz v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat Gasod et ha-Shabbat led merit olam Uvayom ha'shvi Shabbat v'inafash Shabbat v'inafash Shabbat Vayinafar v'shamru v'nei Yisrael es ha-Shabbat lasot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei b'riah gafen Amen. L'chaim. Okay, Torah Study blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. Okay, everybody, good Shabbos. Chag Sameach again. We are up to Miketz, and there are three Torah portions in a row, Vayeshev, Miketz, and next week Vayigash, that all fall out in and around Hanukkah. So, let me close that door. Hey, Ian, would you mind closing? The light shines right in my face. Thank you, Ian. There are 3 Torah portions that fall right around Hanukkah, and they all involve Joseph. Vayeshev, which we had last week, Miketz this week, and Vayigash next week. And there are many, many themes that connect Joseph to Hanukkah. Now, Joseph lived somewhere between 16 and 1700 years before Hanukkah happened. So if Joseph were to be connected to Hanukkah, then it's a pretty big coincidence, or it's divine. We're going to look at one of them today, and then you can decide what you think, and you can either be right or wrong. It's up to you. We want to start today. I just want to point out before we begin that it's not until next week in Vayigash that the brothers find out who Joseph is. Throughout this entire Torah portion, they don't know that Joseph, the man who's second in charge of Egypt, is their brother. They don't. That reveal doesn't come until next week. So just keep that in mind, that everything that we're going to be looking at in this week's Torah, the third triennial cycle portion of this week's Torah portion, which we'll be looking at, but really the whole Torah portion, they don't know who he is. Okay. All right, so I want to look at the last part. We're in the third triennial cycle this year. So we're going to start a particular narrative where the story is that Joseph is about to have the brothers over for a meal. And he's going to bring them all in. Once all the brothers are there, meaning that they've now gone back to Canaan, and fetched Benjamin and brought him back. And Joseph releases Simon, who was in jail, who he kept as like collateral. And so now all the brothers are together. And now that all the brothers are together, Joseph's going to host them for a meal. That's the scene we're about to look at.
I thought it was Benjamin that was held back.
No, Simon. Benjamin was kept in Canaan, and then although they're two different scenarios, but the one that we're looking at now is the one where he releases Simon. And there are a lot of reasons why. And there's also a debate as to how long Simon was kept in jail. Some people say up to 2 years. But most of the rabbis reject that and say that there's no reason to actually believe that. Although the 2 years do coordinate with the extra 2 years that Joseph was in jail because the butler conveniently forgot to tell Pharaoh that I know someone. Remember, Joseph's last request at the end of last week's Torah portion was, please tell Pharaoh about me. And he says, interestingly enough, he says, tell him that I'm here because I'm not supposed to be here and I'm a Hebrew. I'm a Hebrew. Which, if you're ever in jail in a foreign country, telling them you're Jewish isn't usually something that, let them go then. You're right, that's not usually something so great. But Joseph does that, which shows his pride. By the way, there's a story. I heard this from Rabbi Harlig. There's a story about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that when the Vichy government came to the place in France where the Lubavitcher Rebbe was living, the Rebbe studied at Sorbonne and was living in Paris for a while, and when the Vichy government came to the village where he and his wife were living, they sent someone to each house to ask them their religion. And so the Rebbe wasn't home, but his wife was, and they came and they asked her, what's your religion? And she said, Orthodox. And so she told the story to the Rebbe, and he said, that's all you said, Orthodox? She said, yeah. So he went down to the Vichy government, to the office, and said, Jewish. Make sure you put Jewish. He didn't want anyone to think that he wasn't Jewish. I don't recommend this. If the Vichy, all right, chas v'shalom. All right, so we are chapter 43. verse 19. So it'd be a little tricky to find because it's not at the beginning, but chapter 43, verse 19, if anyone has it in Plout. 275 in Plout. Okay, chapter 43, verse 19.
Okay, ready, Rabbi?
Everyone have it? Okay, Judy, here we go.
So they went up to Joseph's house. Let me see where I'm going. The house steward, and spoke to him at the entrance of the house. "If you please, my lord," they said, "we came down once before to procure food, but when we arrived at the night encampment, we opened our But when we arrived at the night encampment and opened our bags, there was each one's money in the mouth of his bag, our money in full. So we have brought it back with us, and we have brought down with us other money to procure food. We do not know who put the money in our bags." He replied, "All is well with you. Do not be afraid. Your God and God of your father must have put the treasure in your bags for you. I got your payment." And he brought out Simeon to them.
Right, you see that because Simon was in jail, so now he brought him back out.
Then the man brought the men into Joseph's house. He gave them water to bathe their feet, and he provided feed for their asses. They laid out their gifts to await Joseph's arrival at noon, for they had heard that they were to dine there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts that they had brought with them into the house, bowing low before him to the ground. He greeted them, and he said, "How is your aged father of whom you spoke? Is he still in good health?" They replied, "It is well with your servant, our father. He is still in good health." And they bowed and made obeisance.
So everything that's happening here is typical stuff that happened when you went to see the king. You know, you bring a present, you bow. It's all the same stuff. Now, Joseph's very clever. He cares more about Jacob. Although we're not sure how he feels about Jacob. Why aren't we sure how Joseph feels about Jacob? Because if he didn't reach out to him, right? All this time he's been second in command, but why doesn't he reach out to him? Remember, we did this class once. No, why doesn't Joseph reach out to Jacob? Remember when Joseph found the brothers and then the brothers threw him into the pit? And Jacob was the one who said, "Go out and find your brothers." And according to the rabbis, Joseph isn't sure whether Jacob was in on it or not, that they were going to kill him or sell him. Because one day, Jacob just says, "Go out and find your brothers." Okay, he goes out and finds his brothers. The brothers take him and throw him into the pit and sell him into slavery. And his last, he wondered, now Jacob wasn't in on it, but he doesn't know that. And so he's not sure. He's not sure that he is in on it. He's just not sure that he's not. So that's the answer that the rabbis usually give when we ask, why didn't Joseph contact Jacob all this time? He's been in charge. He could do whatever he wants. He couldn't even send a letter, say, "Hey, were you in on it?" But now he's asking, very cleverly, they said last time, because they might have said, "How do you know we have a father? And why would you even care?" I'm sure they're wondering, why do you even care? What do you care about some Jew in Canaan? You're second in command of Egypt. But he does ask, which is probably send some sort of message to the brothers. Okay, and then he's going to now, in verse 29, turn his attention to Benjamin. Now, why does he like Benjamin more than the other brothers? It's his full brother. Why? Because they had the same mother in Rachel. But also Benjamin wasn't involved in the sale. Benjamin wasn't one of the brothers who threw him into the pit and sold him into slavery. So he's got a much better feel for Benjamin. And that is going to be a big part of what we're going to talk about now. What I really want to focus on today is Benjamin. Harvey?
Maybe the age difference between Benjamin and Joseph. Because being told, basically, you're on the road and Rachel died.
Yeah. But I don't know the answer, but I know but by this point, Benjamin already has 10 kids. So he's not a young guy. And Benjamin is already, you think of Benjamin as this little kid. I mean, he had 10 kids. All that means he was a 32-year-old Chabad rabbi. That doesn't mean much. But, they do well. It's a good question. I'll look that up. I don't know the exact difference in age. It's a very good question. But I did hear this week a lecture in which someone was saying, by this point, Benjamin already had 10 kids. Okay, let's go now, verse 29. Okay.
Looking about, he saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and asked, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me?" And he went on, "May God be gracious to you, my boy." With that, Joseph hurried out, for he was overcome with feeling toward his brother, and was on the verge of tears. He went into a room and wept there. Then he washed his face, reappeared, and, now in control of himself, gave the order, "Serve the meal." They served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves. For the Egyptians could not dine with the Hebrews, since that would be abhorrent to the Egyptians.
Right. Why is that? By the way, the answer is 7. Joseph was 7 years older than Benjamin, which is an interesting number, actually. Because the Hebrews ate meat, and the Egyptians didn't, because the Egyptians worshipped animals. And so it was disgusting to them to see Jews eating meat, to see anyone eating meat, because it was like eating their gods, which was very weird to them. But Joseph ate meat.
Just a quick question. If they served Joseph separately and his brothers separately, and the Egyptians separately, wouldn't his brothers know that Joseph was a Hebrew?
Not necessarily. I mean, possibly, but not, I don't think they would necessarily think that.
They might just assume it's some sort of...
You know how they would know he was a Hebrew? If he ate with them and ate meat. Because they say, "Why are you an Egyptian eating meat?" Right, so, but the real reason, so that's an interesting point. That would have, maybe given it away. But the Torah makes it look like that's not the reason that Joseph ate alone. He ate alone because he couldn't handle seeing Benjamin, and he was overcome with emotion. But also, if they would have seen him eating meat, now, he could have said, "I'm a Hebrew and I eat meat, but you know what? For this one meal, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to have like an Israeli salad. I'm going to have like some tomatoes and cucumbers and some hummus, and, for this one meal, I won't eat meat. And they, I'll pass it." I don't know. But then they might have said, "Wow, it doesn't bother you that we're eating meat?" Maybe they would be scared to eat meat in front of him, because they're thinking, "Boy, we're eating, this guy's second in command of Egypt, we're about to eat his God. This might make him really angry." So there's a lot going on here. Okay, now we're up to where?
33.
33. So, by the way, this is the end of 33 and 34, the end of the chapter. And 34 is the verse I really want to focus on. Everything up till now has been a build-up to verse 34. Okay?
As they were seated by his direction, from the oldest in the order of his seniority to the youngest in the order of his youth, the men looked at one another in astonishment. Portions were served them from the table, but Benjamin's portion was several times that of anyone else's, and they drank their fill with him. Then he instructed his house.
Okay. That's good. So, can you read verse 34? It says several times more?
It says several times more, yeah. Oh, this says several times, yeah.
Several's misleading. So let's just look at the Hebrew for a second. Vayisa masaot. So vayisa, and he passed, or he lifted. When we do the priestly benediction, the last part, Yisa Hashem, the Yisa is the first word of the third part of the priestly benediction. May God lift his face upon you. Yisa, he lifted, or he passed. Masaot. A masa in modern Hebrew is a truck. Something is being carried from one place to another. Mi'et panav Elohim, before them. V'tei rev. Rev is like rabbah, todah rabbah. Rabbah means much, right? More, increased. Masa'at Binyamin, the portion of Benjamin. Mimasat Kulam, from the portions of everyone else. Chamesh, Echad, Shtayim, Shalosh, Arba. Chamesh, 5. Doesn't mean several at all. It means 5. Now, next word is tricky. How do you say hand? Yad. Now, how do you say hands plural? Yadayim. Al netilat yadayim. Right? When I was growing up in a Chabad day school, we had to say that blessing before we could eat. We were supposed to also wash our hands, but that was not as common. But yadayim, now all body parts in, Hebrew has male and female words. All body parts in Hebrew are female words, but have male endings. So it's an exception to the rule. So we say yadayim, if you wanted to say good hands, you'd say yadayim tovot. So, right, the endings don't match, right? That is just, that happens sometimes in Hebrew. But my point is that the correct way of saying hands in Hebrew is yadayim. But look at the word here. It's not yadayim, it's yad plural with the female ending, yadot. Yad means hand. You know the name of the Holocaust Museum in Israel? Yad Vashem. Vashem means and name. Hand and name. Hand and name together is an expression that means a living monument. It's from Isaiah. But here it says yadot. So, obviously we ask the question, why doesn't it say the correct word yadayim and not yadot? And the answer is because it's a different word. So, what does it, so yadayim means hands, but yadot means something else. Richard?
What is a shoresh?
What is a shoresh?
In terms of a shoresh, in terms of language, you're working through the language.
Oh, so there's not really, a shoresh is a root, but yad it's a noun, it's not a verb. So there's no, the shoreshes come from verbs. So nouns don't always have a shoresh. Now, yad, I mean, sometimes, this is a little tricky, but a gerund will always have a root. So a gerund is it can be a noun or an adverb, but it's always going to have a root. In Hebrew, it's called a shema poal. But not all nouns have roots. So it comes from something, but in this case, yad, it probably does. I don't know what I can't think of any verb that the word yad comes from. There probably is one, but I'm not sure what it is. Usually I'm pretty good at those, but I can't think of one. Okay, so if you look at Rashi, the word masa'ot means portions. By the way, what's weird about 34? He passed portions from before him to them, and Benjamin's portion was greater than the portions of all of them, 5-fold. So, okay, we know he likes Benjamin more because they have the same mother and because Benjamin wasn't involved in selling him into slavery. But how much does Benjamin need to eat? 5 portions? Seems like a lot. Can you imagine? And don't you think people would have said, no? It's like, okay, give him a little more. So, what's 5? Why 5? Okay, so just hold on to that for a second. Rashi tells us that, first of all, masa'ot is portions of food, okay, 5 times. Now, where did those 5 portions come from, Rashi tells us? Now, Rashi's just taking this from the Midrash, but he says his own portion that was due to him, meaning all the brothers got 1 portion. So the first portion that Benjamin got was the portion that he got. with his brothers. But then Joseph gave him his own portion. Osnat, Joseph's wife, gave Benjamin her portion. Manasseh and Ephraim, Joseph's sons, they all gave their portions to Benjamin. So it wasn't just Benjamin getting his own portion, but Joseph, his wife, and their kids, that makes 4 more portions. 4 plus 1 is, I got the same thing, 5. That's how he gets 5. That's why 5. If Joseph would have had 3 sons, he would have got 6. Right? Okay. And they drank with him. But this is like an interesting point. So verse 34, they drank and they imbibed with him. But from the day they sold Joseph into slavery, they had not drunk wine, nor had he drunk wine. This day, however, they drank wine. Which is very interesting because they recognized that they didn't deserve to be happy ever since they sold him into slavery. And he recognized that there was something wrong, that he was disconnected from his family, and it wasn't appropriate to celebrate. But he said, now that we're reunited, I can drink. And they say, since he's drinking, we better drink, or else we end up in jail. Because that's what you do when the viceroy drinks. But there's probably more symbolism to it. But I don't want to get too far into that. But what I do want to ask is, what does the 5 really symbolize? And why specifically did Joseph and his family feel it was necessary that they all pass up their food and give it to Benjamin? Now, we could say, because they wanted the appearance that they didn't eat meat, because they didn't want to give away that they were Jewish. But the Kli Yakar, which is a medieval Kabbalistic commentary, goes a little bit deeper. And his view is really an amalgam of some different things that are said in the Midrash and the Zohar. Okay, so Ed, would you mind reading the Kli Yakar on 4334?
The brothers believe that this is why he was giving them gifts and honoring them in order to appease what they suspected of being spies. And there was no such thing as them. And Benjamin's load increased because of the suspicion they had brought them through the perils of the journey for free. But the truth is that there is an allusion here to the future, because the Hebrews interpreted Lachman, which means 5 hands, and it fell on the necks of Benjamin, who wept over the temple, which would be built in part and which was destined to be destroyed. And according to this midrash, we can say that this is why Benjamin's load increased 5 hands, an allusion to the generations that the temple would be built in part, and there would be 5 things in it with greater intensity, and they are the Shekhinah, the Ark, and the Urim and Thummim, and prophecy and fire from heaven. And they were missing in the second temple.
Okay, so you have this period of time of 5 generations between the destruction of the first temple and the building of the second temple, or at least the starting of it. And there was a difference. So what does the temple have to do with Benjamin? If you remember, there were 13 tribes, right? Because Joseph was split into 2, Ephraim and Manasseh. And so we count them as 2. Originally there were 12, so now 13. 10 of them lived in the north, which was called Israel, which the kingdom broke up after Solomon died, Solomon died, by the way, in 920 BCE. Right after that, when his son Rehoboam took over, the north broke off. A guy named Jeroboam took over in the north. So you have 10 tribes living in the north, 3 tribes living in the south. The 10 tribes living in the north, a couple hundred years after that, became totally lost when they were conquered by the Assyrians. And that's when we had what we call the 10 lost tribes. So we now have in the south 3 tribes: Judah, Benjamin, and the Levites. Now, the Levites sort of lived all over the place because if you remember, the Levites weren't assigned any ancestral homeland, and the other tribes had to give them place to live, but most of them lived in and around Jerusalem because they were working in the temple. So today, anyone who's a Levite or a Kohen, any Levis or Cohens or Khans, or Kahans, or Leibowitzes, or Levkovs, or Levitts, either got that name at Ellis Island, or they descend from the tribe of Levi. Right? Sometimes, things get... if you're not a Kohen or a Levite, you're from Benjamin or Judah. However, Benjamin was really tiny and got folded into Judah, to the point where anyone who was still Jewish after the first temple was destroyed in the north was from the south. And the south was called Judea. And so if you're from Judea, then you are a Jew. And that's why we're called the Jews. Okay. Now, my point is, for today, that in the south was Jerusalem. And that was the section that was apportioned to Benjamin. So we connect the tribe of Benjamin with the Holy Temple. And that's what's happening here according to the Midrash and the Kabbalah. Is that when remember, Joseph's a dreamer. He sees the future. I love when people tell me, I don't believe that. Joseph couldn't have seen that far. I was good with the stocks and the moon and all that stuff, but now you've gone too far. All the dreams up till now I was good with, but this dream, Okay, so according to the mirror, he sees Benjamin and he starts crying because when he thinks of Benjamin, he sees the future. And what is he seeing at this particular moment? That there's going to be a destruction of the temples. Now you would think, yeah, but I'm relieved because the temple's going to be destroyed and then it's going to be rebuilt. But why does the Midrash connect this prophecy between the difference between the first temple and the second temple? Because of the 5 portions. And there were 5 things that were different between the first temple and the second temple. Okay? This is incredible stuff. This is what Kli Yakar, this is what makes you a great rabbi. You come with those kind of connections. Today, it's like someone who's good with Tat Shabbat, and, that's what makes a great rabbi today. Like, oh yeah, he can sing the Pormspiel to Queen. But back then, it was making these unbelievable connections. So, now, what were the 5 things that we lost in the first temple and were not manifested in the second temple? The Kli Yakar is going to tell us. Okay, so I'm just going to read this so I can explain it. In the middle of the Kli Yakar it says, and according to this Midrash, does everyone see that sort of in the middle? Okay, and according to this Midrash we can say, that is why Benjamin's load increased 5 hands, an allusion to the generations that the temple would be built in part, and there would be 5 things in it with greater intensity, and they are. Okay, so the Shekhinah, God's divine presence. When the first temple was destroyed, God's divine presence left from the Holy Temple to resting on top of the Mount of Olives, which is where it is today. Okay? It wasn't no longer in the Holy Temple, and it didn't come back. The Ark of the Covenant, we never found it. It's believed that King Solomon built all these tunnels, and that when the first temple was destroyed, they hid it under in the tunnels under the Temple Mount. I'm convinced that the Israeli government knows where it is, that they've been down there and they found it, but they're not allowed to say because they shouldn't be digging under there. It's actually it's why we'd be winning all the wars, because we hide it when we go out to fight. Raiders of the Lost Ark? Yeah? No? Okay. But the Ark was not present in the second temple. Okay? So, they built the temple, they built the place where it was supposed to be, but it wasn't there. It was empty. The Urim and Tumim, the different breastplate and stuff, the things that they used to connect with God, that Aaron used, it was gone. It's probably in the basement of the Vatican. Because they took a lot of stuff. So, but we don't know where it wasn't there. Prophecy. There was nobody was allowed to go in to the Holy Temple where Moses used to go, or, where the high priest would go, and God would show up there. And the fire from heaven. So what happened in the first temple was when they put the sacrifice on the altar, a fire would come down from heaven and consume the animal. In the second temple, they had to light the fire themselves. Yeah, all this is in the Tanakh. You can read through the book of Jeremiah. It's all explained there. But this is, according to the Kli Yakar, the 5 things that were missing in the second temple. Okay, now, then we're going to get a little bit more Kabbalistic, okay? So just brace yourself for some Kabbalah, okay? Now, everything we've set up till now is Midrash, which is basically just exegesis on the Tanakh. But now, we're going to get into some Kabbalah. Why? Again, we're asking the question, why 5? Kabbalah loves numbers. Right? They always find different things. Okay, so an allusion to the word 5 times. A hand rises to the number ayin, an allusion to the temple of the eye of the earth, where the Sanhedrin meets and where they sacrifice a bull, corresponding to 8 nations. Okay, who knows what that sentence meant? Nobody, no clue. All right, now here, let's translate it from English into English. Okay, so an allusion to the word 5 times, the Kli Yakar is saying, why 5? Okay. A hand rises to the number ayin. Okay, so what does that mean? Yad, the Hebrew word for yad is yud dalid. Right? Yad means hand. We have yadot, the 5 yadot. But what's yad? Yad is a hand. Now watch this. What's the first letter of yad? Yud. Aleph, bet, gimel, dalid, hey, vav, zayin, chet, tet, yud. 10. Hold that number 10 in your head. What's the second letter in yad? Dalid. Aleph, bet, gimel, dalid. 10 plus 4? 14. Good. Now, 14, look what it says here. An allusion to a hand rises to the number ayin. So a hand is 14. What's on a hand? Fingers. How many? 5. Right? How many portions does he hand out? 5. How many books of the Torah are there? 5. Okay. What's 5 times 14? 70. Very good. All right. 5. I had to get a calculator out the first time I did this, but 5 times 14 is 70. Okay. Now, look what it says here. An allusion to the temple. Okay, so an allusion to the word 5 times. A hand rises to the number ayin, which means a hand rises means 5 times 14 is 70. Ayin, the Hebrew letter ayin, so this is how it goes in numerology. Aleph, bet, chai is 18. Like we have numbers. Aleph, bet, gimel, dalet, hey. Vav, zayin, chet, tet, yud. That's 10. After 10, this is like Roman numerals. After 10, you go to 20. Kaf, lamed, mem, nun. Kaf, lamed, mem, nun, samech, ayin. Okay, so 40, 50, 60, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 is ayin. Okay, so ayin is 70. Okay, so all it's saying here is 5 times 14 is 70, and 70 in Hebrew is represented by the letter ayin. Right? Every letter has a numerical value, and the numerical value of ayin is 70. Okay? So we don't need to know 70 yet. All I'm saying is that 15 times 4, 14 times 5, where do I get 14? 14 is yad. 5, why 5? Because Benjamin is given 5 handfuls. So 5 times 70. Now what's 70? 70 is ayin. The letter is called ayin. But ayin also is a word in Hebrew that means something. Good, I. What's I? So the temple, the holy temple that's in the land of Benjamin, was known as the eye of the earth, the ayin. So the 15 times 4, which equals 70, Kabbalistically, is an illusion. So let me start over. Why did Joseph look at Benjamin? How do we know that Joseph looks at Benjamin and thinks about the holy temple? So the first thing you say is, well, because the holy temple was in the land of Benjamin. Okay? Second thing we say is, well, he gave him 5 portions. And 5 portions represents the 5 things that were different from the first temple to the second temple. But then we say, well, 5 is by a word that represents 14, and 5 times 14 is 70. So 70 is ayin, and ayin is what they called the temple. It was the eye of the earth. Why? Because it's from there that God sees into the world, from the holy temple. That's where God started creation. That's why it's a holy spot. Okay, so that's Kabbalah. You can take it or leave it. Now, I want to tell you something, though. What if I told you that when the Maccabees, by the way, what does all this have to do with Hanukkah? Well, Hanukkah is a story about the temple. What does the word Hanukkah mean? Hanukkah means rededication of the temple. Where do you light the menorah? So now the Kabbalah is saying, yeah, but okay, we understand that the temple is going to be in Benjamin, but who cares? Well, we care. Why? Because this Torah portion is always going to be read during the holiday of Hanukkah, which is a temple holiday. So you have all these allusions in the Torah portion that's always going to fall out on the only holiday that we have that's all about the temple. So it's starting to fit. But now we figure out, according to the rabbis and according to the Talmud, there were 5 things that the Maccabees used to defeat the Greeks. Okay? And they are, well, basically it's prayer, belief, divine providence, passing Torah from one generation to the next, and belief in the Torah. Those are belief in the Torah. Those were the 5 things that we learn that the Maccabees employed in order to be the reason that God allowed them to be victorious over the Greeks. So, what if I told you that throughout the Torah there are 5 verses that Judy? Oh, are you raising your hand? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were just injured. Sorry. Okay. I just got the fingers. I didn't see the. Okay. What if I told you that throughout the Torah there are 5 verses? Count them. How many? 5 verses. Each one referring to one of the 5 things that the Maccabees use, and each one refers to them by using the word yad. I'm going to show them to you. There are 5 verses in the Torah. Each one refers to one of the characteristics of the Maccabees, and each one of those verses has in common the word yad. It's pretty cool, right? Okay.
Weren't there 70 people in the Sanhedrin?
Yeah, actually there are.
In that sentence it says we're the Sanhedrin.
Yeah, and by the way, there are a lot of connections to the Sanhedrin, but and to the Holy Temple. Another one is that it was in the Holy Temple that on Sukkot, which is the same number of days of Hanukkah, because a lot of people think they modeled Hanukkah after Sukkot. That's why it's the same. That's why it's 8 days. But so Sukkot and Hanukkah have a very interesting connection. But it's on Sukkot that they offered the 70 bulls, one for each of the 70 nations. So there's a lot of connection now between 70 and the Holy Temple, which is 5 times 14 in our verse, which is Benjamin, which is in the holiday, which is in the Torah portion on the holiday of Hanukkah, which is in the portion of Benjamin. And so what I'm showing you is you could say there's one. What? Right, I said that, right, which we always read during Hanukkah. So what I'm showing you is you could say there's one or two similarities, but there's dozens and dozens of similarities. I mean, the proof just keeps on coming and coming. Okay? Now, so, by the way, if you look, one last thing, it doesn't do it justice in Hebrew, but you know what the word Hanukkah means to rededicate. But Hanukkah happened on the 25th of Kislev. And the last two letters of Hanukkah are Kaf He. Right, Kaf He. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yud. That's 10. And then we go to 20. Kaf. Kaf is 20. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, He is 5. 25th. The last two letters of Chanukah are Kaf He, 25, which Hanukkah happened on the 25th of Kislev. So fine, but what's Chanu? Chanu means they were given grace. They were, you know, the word chen means grace. They were given grace on the 25th. Yeah, that's Bibi. Chanina in Hebrew means a pardon. So if you look at Zechariah 4:7, he brought out the first stone, offering a beautiful gift to her. That beautiful gift is in Hebrew grace. They were given grace. So this word chanu, meaning grace, is referred to by the prophet Zechariah as referring to the temple, and in the section of the Levites. So anyway, it's just another reference. All the stuff that we didn't read there from the Sanhedrin on are just different references to connecting 70 to the Holy Temple. Okay, but forget that for a second. I want to show you 5 verses. So if you look now at Exodus 17:12. Exodus 17:12. We don't need everyone to read it. We just need one person to find it. But this is where Safaria comes in really handy.
507.
507. Okay, so you have it, Exodus 17:12. So look what it says. But Moses' hands grew heavy, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. While Aaron and Hur on each side supported his hands remained steadily until the sunset. So you actually see hands there quite a bit, right? You believe me that the word yad is in that verse? Okay. Now, if you look on the sheet that I gave you, the last source on the first sheet, Onkelos, which is the first Aramaic translation of the Torah, Moses' hands became heavy. They took a stone and placed it under him, and he sat upon it. Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one of them on one side and one of them on the other side. His hands remained an expression of faith as he prayed, were spread in prayer until sunset. So this is the first characteristic of the Maccabees, prayer. While his hands were up, they were winning the war. When he put his hands down, they were losing the war. So they said, you know what, maybe we should try to keep his hands up. So 2 guys said, you hold that hand, I'll hold this hand, we'll keep the hands up, maybe we'll win the war. And they did. But what was the point of having the hands up? That to go to battle, you have to rely on God, which is what the Maccabees did. So that's number 1. Okay, number 2. Genesis, if you don't have to find it if you don't want, I can just read it to you if you trust me. But if you don't believe me, Genesis 46:4. Which says, Genesis 46:4, I myself will go down with you to Egypt. I myself will also bring you back, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. Right? So you hear that? Joseph's hand? His hand? Okay, what does that mean? On the back of the sheet, Sforno, 16th century Italy, says You yourself will not have to worry about any of your affairs while in Egypt, seeing that Joseph will take care of all the mundane matters pertaining to daily life. In other words, you can keep your eyes closed when it comes to mundane matters, and you can focus on the opposite of mundane, which is spiritual. And so the Maccabees, we have another second verse here with the word yad, and it refers to focusing on being spiritual, which was power number 2 of the Maccabees. Okay, third verse, chapter 46. If you just skip down, Genesis 46, verse 2. Oh, that's the one I just read. Sorry, I gave you number 3. Now we got to go Exodus. Wait.
48, 14.
Yeah, okay, wait, I think I'm missing one here. Exodus 14:20. Okay, so if you just come with me to Exodus. Did we do this one yet? No. 14:21? Yeah, no, it's not on the sheet, but Exodus 14, just make sure, chapter 14, verse 21 says the following. Then Moses held out his arm, but the Hebrew is yado, his hand. This is when he splits the sea. Then Moses held out his arm over the sea, and God drove back by the sea with a strong east wind all the night and turned the sea into dry ground. The waters split. So when Moses split the sea, he then held out his arm. Well, after the sea split, he then held out his arm, his hand, according to this verse. This is the one that teaches us that faith in battle, that God can fight on your behalf, which was another thing the Maccabees needed to know. Okay, 2 more real quickly. Genesis 48. Genesis 48, 14. 303. Says, okay, but Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, though he was the younger, and his left hand was on Manasseh's head. He crossed his hands, although Manasseh was the firstborn. And this is the case of, when he does the famous blessing, but he's passing the blessing on from one generation to the other. And if you care that Torah is passed on from one generation to the other, the Maccabees had to fight to make sure that happened. And a big thing about the Maccabees was passing on Torah. That's why we have Haftorahs. That's why we have the dreidel, because all these things were illegal to do. But the Maccabees, and they tried to find ways to continue teaching Torah even in dark times. And we have a verse here that uses the word yad. Okay, and the last one is Deuteronomy 34:12, which says, bear with me. This is like the end of the Torah, basically. It is the end of it. And for all the great might and awesome power that Moses displayed before Israel. So the second word, ulechol hayad, and for all the great strength, but the word that's used for strength there is yad. Hand. And Rashi there says this refers to the fact that he received the Torah that was on the tablets in his hands. You have to accept Torah. You have to make Torah part of your life if you want to defeat your enemies. So we have 5 verses that use the word yad. And 5 times yad is 14, 5 is 5. And now we have the understanding that 5 times 14 is 70, and all of this portions that they were handing Benjamin, there was a reason. It was all a prediction about Hanukkah. Now, let's conclude. For every holiday, there is a prayer that there's an addition to the tefillah prayer that we add in for all of our biblical holidays. It was called Ya'aleh V'Yavo. You familiar with it? So when you're doing the tefillah. There's a box. And it says, on the biblical holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and the festivals, Sukkot, Shavuot, Pesach, when you're doing the tefillah, you add that prayer, Ya'aleh v'yavo. But when that was written, Hanukkah and Purim hadn't happened yet. So we can't use it for Hanukkah and Purim because it says it's for the biblical holidays. So the rabbis had to write a new prayer after Hanukkah that they decided to use for Hanukkah and Purim, and it's called Al Hanisim. Al Hanisim ve'al ha'purkan ve'al ha'tshuva ve'al ha'milchamot she'asita l'avotenu. Right? That's what it is. So that's the first line that goes with Purim and with Hanukkah. But then there's a paragraph, one for Hanukkah and one for Purim. So I just wanted to read for you the Hanukkah one. So if you look on the other sheet that I gave you, it's dark and small and impossible to read, but let's read it. Do you see on the top of the page, it says, one box on the left says on Hanukkah and the other box says on Purim? Okay, so let's read the Hanukkah one. Does anyone have a mic? Annabelle, would you mind reading where it says, in the days of Matityahu?
In the days of Mattisyahu, the son of Yochanan, the high priest, the Hasmonean and his sons, when the wicked Greek kingdom rose up against your people Israel to make them forget your Torah and compel them to stray from the statutes of your will, you in your great mercy stood up for them in the time of their distress. You took up their grievance, judged their claim, and avenged their wrong. You delivered the strong in the hands of the weak, the many into the hands of the few, the impure into the hands of the pure, the wicked into the hands of the righteous, and the wanton in the hands of the diligent students of your Torah. For yourself you made a great and holy name in your world, and for your people Israel you worked a great victory and salvation as this very day. Thereafter your children came to the Holy of Holies of your house, cleansed your temple, purified the site of your holiness, and kindled lights in the courtyards of your sanctuary. And they established these 8 days of Hanukkah to express thanks and praise to your great name.
Okay. My whole life I've been reading this, and I never really understood it until this week. And so here's what it means. I mean, it tells the story. It tells the story of Hanukkah. But Joseph looks at Benjamin, and Joseph's the dreamer. We know Joseph's the dreamer. And he sees the future. We know he sees the future. And he sees Benjamin, and he has a prophecy. And we don't know what the prophecy is yet, but we know that it has something to do with Benjamin, who was given the land of Jerusalem. And we know it has something weird to do with all of a sudden giving him 5 portions. And not only did Joseph was ready to give his portion, but Joseph's entire family was saying, we're giving everything we have to this spot because it represents what's going to be taken from us, what we're going to lose when the first temple is destroyed. And that causes Joseph to cry. But there's good news ahead. Because eventually Joseph and Benjamin are going to be reunited and everyone's going to know who's who. And there's going to be a reunification, or you might call a rededication. So Joseph's not totally upset. And they start drinking. And there's alcohol. Or there's wine. And there hasn't been wine in a long time, but now there's going to be wine. And you know when there wasn't, on every sacrifice they poured libations. And so for those years, those 5 generations in between the 2 temples, there was no wine. Nobody drank wine. Why? Because they didn't have wine to pour on the libations. And the Jews said, how can we be drinking wine when we're not able to be in Jerusalem and pour the wine on our sacrifices? But now we're going to rebuild the temple and pour the wine again. So they started drinking wine again. Hang on, we got a lot more to go. So there's something bad happening, but something good is going to happen in the end. And where's it going to be in Benjamin? Well, what's Benjamin? Benjamin's Jerusalem. And then we see, well, 5 times 14 is 70. And there are going to be these Maccabees who are going to come, and they're going to do something with Yad 5 times. And we just saw those in the Torah, and we saw what they were. And then we come to the Al Hanisim. And it puts it all together for us. So maybe there's only one verse that's important, really, in terms of what we're talking about. But if you can read in the Hebrew, and then I'll read it in the English. But if you count down in the Hebrew, all the way on the right, where on top it says on Hanukkah in English, and then under that it says Bimei Netanyahu, Matityahu, not Netanyahu, that's a different thing. But if you count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, it says Masarta Giburim. You sent us heroes. Biyad Chalashim. Yad. You hear that word yad? Hand? That's one. Biyad Chalashim. Heroes over the weak. Urabim biyad ma'etim. And the many into the hands of the few. Utmeim biyad taharim. And the impure in the hands of the pure. Urashayim biyad tzadikim. And the wicked in the hands of the righteous. Uzadim biyad oskei toratecha. And those who defy the Torah into the hands of those who keep your Torah. And in this line you have here 5 yads, each one representing one of the 5 verses that we saw in the Torah, one of the 5 different concepts that the Maccabees used. It's brought out right here. Because Joseph is the embodiment of Hanukkah. And he foretold the story of Hanukkah when he gave 5 portions to Benjamin, saying, our temple is going to be destroyed, but don't worry, because someday it's going to be rebuilt. We're going to go back to pouring the wine. We're going to go back to having the 70, 14 times 5. We're going to go back to having the 70 members of the Sanhedrin. By the way, the Sanhedrin met on the Holy Temple, on the Temple Mount. We're going to go back to offering the 70 sacrifices. And we're going to go back to the Jewish people being reunited, which is exactly what Hanukkah is all about. All of those things happen. 5 times 14 equals 70. Okay, Shabbat Shalom.
Something to be said that Joseph knew that his line with Manasseh and
Menashe?
would disappear, and Benjamin would stay.
Probably.
So they gave their portions to him. So I don't know.
It's 100%. Yeah.
Because
Good point.
it seems weird that Joseph is such a major character,
Right.
and Ephraim and Manasseh are such wonderful characters that they would disappear eventually.
Yeah, they became part of the 10 lost tribes. But Ephraim is destined to return. The original, there's 2 Mashiach. First Mashiach is Mashiach ben David. We're living in that time now, where the Jews go back to the land of Israel. Mashiach ben Yosef is when the Holy Temple is brought down and all the other nations are destroyed.
And all the tribes come back, I imagine.
And everyone comes back.
Okay.
Yeah. That's Mashiach ben Yosef.
Got it.
So, but yeah, that's a good point.
In dikduk, when you have the dagesh in the verb, it strengthens it, doesn't it? So it's in ayin hapara.
Yeah, fair. Very nice.
How are you?
Good job.
Shalom.
Mazel tov, by the way.
Toda rabah.
Yeah.
I was going to mention or ask you anyway that Kabbalistic is the Hamsa. But
It's a very Kabbalistic concept.
When you say Yadot, they're more than one hand.
Right.
So probably the 5 hands.
Very nice. Yafeh. The what? Oh, I gotta text it to you. Yeah, I will. Thanks.
Just a question. I know that yeshivas, the ultra-Orthodox, don't use internet and all that, but do you think any of them use AI to figure out some
They
of
do.
this stuff
They actually have
easily?
smartphones. I'm sorry, not smartphones. They have kosher phones.
Okay.
Kosher phones are phones that can only get certain apps, so they can get like the Torah apps and all. They use all
Because
kinds of
now
computers.
You could very easily do a lot more of this. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very impressive that they did it in the old days when they spent, until now when they spent, but now you could go to AI and go,
They do,
find
yeah.
how many times the number 5 and 14 and what that you could, you know.
There are
And they
such.
do that.
There are such. There's a website called allhatorah.com,
Yeah.
and they do that.
And they do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Nice.
incredible. It's incredible.
Last week you quoted Israeli. I'm very interested in him for many reasons. His quotes and everything are miraculous. Here's the funny thing, which I don't understand. His father was ticked off in the temple or something, gave up and converted to Christianity.
Yeah, I don't know
And
this.
yet-
I don't know much about him,
Yeah.
but that is true. Yeah.
Yeah, but Disraeli comes back